calm waters of the Charles River, just outside the city of Boston, Massachusetts, winds past the home of a man of Jewish faith who appreciates every second of this tranquil scene. Israel Arbeiter's life here is the culmination of an unspoken promise made in an overcrowded Jewish ghetto many decades ago, as the Nazis began forming two lines across conquered Europe.
I and two of my brothers were selected on one side, and my father, my mother, my 7-year-old brother on the other side. I was a teenager and I was never away from my family, and I didn't want to be separated now, so I went back to the side where my parents were staying. My father there realized what's happening here, and he said to me and two of my brothers, "Children, go over there, save yourself, and if you'll survive, remember to carry on the Jewish life and Jewish tradition." And this, I think, saved my life, because I always remember those were the last words that I had from my father. The last words of my father were always with me. My father says, "Remember to carry on with tradition."
Israel Arbeiter and his grandson, Matthew Fritz, are on a 4,000-mile journey, a trip back in time, where Izzy, as he is known to his friends, witnessed indescribable suffering and horrific ways in which men can kill one another. Polish cities such as Warsaw have changed dramatically since the very late summer of 1939, when the German army arrived in Poland's capital. Some scenes of those days survive, but the majority of this city was in ruins by the end of the war. Today, a modern Warsaw flourishes, recovered from Nazi and then later communist rule. The Polish countryside still retains much of its pre-war feel. Farming remains the most common way to make a living, with roughly 60% of Poland's total area devoted to agriculture. The German invasion, or Blitzkrieg, in September of 1939, caught those who lived here in rural Poland by surprise. In the city of Plock, roughly 56 miles from Germany's border, Israel Arbeiter's father, Izzy, was sure the Polish people would be treated fairly by the German army, despite rumors already of cruelty.
My father said, "Children, don't believe it, it's not true. I know the Germans." He said the Germans were here in World War I. They were good to us, that they saved us, they helped us, they saved us from the Bolsheviks. He didn't believe till the very last minute that the Germans would commit such atrocities.
The middle of 5 boys, each spaced 2.5 years apart, Israel Arbeiter's life in the summer of 1939 was typical of other 14-year-olds living in Plock, which was home to one of the oldest Jewish communities in Poland, dating back over 700 years.
The pleasant part of my memories are my youth, where I was born and being a youngster, although we were not rich. But, kids, I had a lot of friends.
It's the not-so-pleasant memories that haunt Israel Arbeiter as he makes his way back to Eastern Europe from the United States. On the day he turns 87 years old, he is aware this visit is probably his last, back to Poland and Germany. Izzy is hopeful by the time this trip is over, he will have resolution to a life that necessitated unimaginable courage and an incredible will to survive. First on Izzy Arbeiter's agenda on arrival in Warsaw is the issue of the silver candlesticks. Are they still where he and his brother buried them over 70 years ago? That question has bothered Israel Arbeiter for decades.
How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Wonderful.
Finding the answer begins at the Warsaw office of Poland's chief rabbi, Michael Szudrik.
They told me about you. They told me that you can open doors and you can do things. My family, in 1940, we were living in Plock, and then the Nazis came in, and we buried some religious items. Number one is the candlestick. My cousin in Boston has exactly the same thing. They're handmade silver candlesticks. It is tradition for Jewish women to light the candles Friday night. It was given to my mother by her mother. Her mother got it from her mother.
In Poland, it's illegal to remove any artifacts from before World War II without permission of the Ministry of Culture. Rabbi Shudrik isn't optimistic it will even get that far.
And you're convinced that the ground there hasn't been touched?
That is there. I can't guarantee. We did hide it from the Nazis, hoping that when we'll come back after the war.
I'm telling you, most things that people buried 60-something years ago are no longer in the ground.
The last words of my father were always with me. My father says, remember to carry on with tradition.
The 2-hour drive northwest from Warsaw to his old home in Plock gives Israel Arbeiter time to reflect on the importance of this trip.
No matter how many times I was here, no matter how old I'm getting, the feeling is the same thing. The memories are there, the pain is there. It'll never go away. I'm very happy that my grandson is here with me, my grandson Matt, because he wanted to know and I want him to learn. And when he gets to my age, he'll be able to tell his grandchildren about his grandfather's life story and where he was and what he saw on this trip. Right there, Jan, the middle. And our house is going to be the third house from the synagogue. Right over here. Right here. See that? It looks like it's closed.
The old Arbeiter home has been condemned. The cruel irony being the same sentence was given to all the Jews who once lived in this city.
See, from right over there, where the light is, that's the Tumska. From there on was the ghetto. I can see the day, I can see the place, and when we were here the last time, the stove where my mother was spending the whole day cooking for 7 people, the bedroom where 7 people were sleeping in one room, my father's tailor shop where he was doing the work. So I see them now in my brothers. It's just horrible to think this big, and I see it. There were 10,000 Jews living in Plock, the majority of them right here in this area, and I think everybody knew everybody. And so it was a friendly neighborhood. I grew up here, and it was a beautiful area, and it was all Jewish section. Everybody spoke Yiddish here, and it was a friendly area. You could walk all day and all night, nobody would bother you. And I spent a very happy youth up till the time that when the Germans came in and occupied the city of Plock, then everybody changed. It changed as soon as the Germans came in. Everything changed, the whole atmosphere, because now the German was ruling the area, I mean this country, Poland. They brought with them the Nuremberg laws, which deprived us of our civil rights. We were not allowed to walk on the sidewalks. We had to walk in the middle of the street. Their policy was to humiliate us, to discriminate, to intimidate, and people started to disappear.
Today, boarded-up windows and doors are a stark contrast to the 1930s, when the Arbeiter home was part of a vibrant community of 30,000 people, 1/3 of which was Jewish.
Oh, look at that, the whole house is...
The chances of finding the candlesticks in the basement are fading.
Okay, hold on.
But Israel Arbeiter and his grandson, Matthew Fritz, have come a very long way to find closure. So this octogenarian contorts his body through a broken basement window into his old home.
Okay, hold on, just catch yourself. You're okay
Yeah,
now?
okay, yeah.
The old cellar is dark, and full of dirt, trash, and the remnants of the lives of others who came after the Arbeiters lost their home to the Nazis.
That's it. These were the cages. That's it. We're in the right area.
It takes some searching,
Who's got the shovel?
but Matt begins to dig in the spot his grandfather believes the family's religious items are buried.
Oh, this is the steps. Okay.
It isn't long before the digging ends, stopped by the building's current owner, who says it's too dangerous for Israel Arbeiter and his grandson to be here.
I just wanted to bring it and keep it in the family, give it to my children, and they will give it to their children and so forth.
City Hall has been the centerpiece of Plock's Old Market Square area since the 1820s. It's also the next stop of a determined Israel Arbeiter. With help from Rabbi Shudrick in Warsaw, the mayor and building officials, intrigued with potentially finding a small part of their city's history, give their formal approval for a supervised excavation the next day in the old Arbeiter house. This time, Izzy and his grandson Matt won't have to crawl through any cracked basement windows.
Who's got the shovel?
We got one behind you.
Matt Fritz and friend John D'Alessandro, also along on the trip, dig for 3 hours.
We're 18 inches deep now.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. The guys had this sweating how they're working there. They digged up half of the basement.
Nobody wants to give up,
Everybody's shaking their head no. We can't give up here, can we?
but Izzy eventually says stop.
With all the trouble that we went through and getting all the permission, and it's not there. And so this is a big disappointment, but it's part of life.
It's not the way Israel Arbeiter wanted his final journey home to begin.
Do widzenia. Dziękuję bardzo i dziękuję za tą herbatkę. To było dobrze.
I think somebody must have come and stole it.
Somebody did. Yeah.
Matthew and I dug 4 feet deep.
It has to be. There's no question about it.
Life would never be the same in the Polish city of Plock after the arrival of the German army in early September 1939. By November, Izzy's oldest brother had vanished.
And the Nazis, especially the SS, were very brutal, doing terrible things, beating, torturing. A ghetto was formed, ordering all the Jewish people from the city of Plock to assemble in a certain section, in a certain area.
The Nazis declared the Plock ghetto free of Jews in late February of 1941, which meant Israel Arbeiter, his parents, 3 remaining brothers, and thousands of others of Jewish ancestry were shipped out of the city in cattle cars during 2 separate deportations. The Arbeiter family was taken first to a transit camp at Soldau in north-central Poland, then on to another Jewish ghetto that had been formed a little further south in the industrial town of Starachowice. In January of 1942, Nazi and German government leaders met at this charming lakeside villa in Wannsee, a suburb of Berlin, to discuss the blueprint for the final solution, which outlined the process by which all Jews across occupied Europe were to be killed. The plan called for mass deportations from German-held territories to extermination or death camps in Poland. In Starachowice, in October of 1942, those who could work for the time being as slave laborers for the German war effort were separated from those who could not.
In the middle of the night, we were ordered out from our homes, leave everything there, assemble in the marketplace where a selection took place. Those that were capable to work were taken on one side, the very young and the elderly selected on the other side. Myself and 2 of my brothers were selected among the young ones to go to work. My parents, my father, my mother, and my 7-year-old brother were sent to a death camp to Treblinka, and they were murdered by gassing and cremated. That was probably the most horrible day of my life, which is still with me.
On a clear, crisp, and starry night, more than 100 miles east of Plock, Izzy Arbeiter and his grandson Matt visit what's left of the Treblinka death camp.
I might not be able to come back here again. And knowing that my family was murdered here.
850,000 people were killed here between July 1942 and August 1943, including Izzy's parents and younger brother. Shortly thereafter, the camp was dismantled by the Nazis, so no evidence would remain. Today, memorials speak to its horrific past.
Every stone has a name, either from a city or a country where it's from. See, Kharkiv. Like I said, and there is some place. You found it? He found it. He found my city. Here, I look at the stone, and I see, and I know where I am. And so that makes it much, much more harder.
You know, you can read in a book, you can see it, but till you're actually physically there and seeing the magnitude, and it just puts it all into perspective, you know.
Matt will carry this with the pardon. Being on the spot here.
A Jewish prayer of mourning is Izzy's way of saying a final goodbye to his family.
עושה שלום במרומו, ויעשה שלום עלינו, ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן.
Following the selection in Starahovice in the fall of 1942, Israel Arbeiter, now 17 years old, and his two surviving brothers, spent an additional 21 months working in the German armaments factory in the town. Starahovice was no longer a ghetto, but now designated a forced labor concentration camp. Those who could work lived. Those who couldn't work were taken to a nearby forest and shot.
The conditions were so bad that there was malnutrition, sickness, and then disease broke out, and was typhoid. And so they had people that got sick with typhoid, so they were unable to work. And for the Germans, if you were unable to work, you were useless. So what they did, they had one barrack where they turned into a quarantine. In the middle of the night, the lights went on in the barrack, and that's all you had, rouse, everybody out, everybody out. And as they were walking out the door, they were being shot right there near the door. So I said to myself, no, I'm not going there. If they want to kill me, let them come in here and kill me here. I says, maybe if I can get out from here and get to the other barracks where the people are, the people that are well, I might have a chance. I opened up the window and jumped out through the window. There were 87 people in that barrack. 86 were killed. There was one that came out from there that escaped. That's the one that is talking to you right now.
It was in Starahovice where Israel Arbeiter first came across another Jew, 16-year-old Hannah Balter, who worked in a German kitchen. Word got out about Izzy being sick, and Hannah risked her own life to help him.
I washed him up a little bit, the face, you know. I give him a little hot water, and what I could give him from the kitchen is a boiled potato. A week or 2 weeks, thank God he got a little better.
The Starahovice labor camp was liquidated by the Nazis in July of 1944, so Izzy, his brothers, and 1,500 other prisoners who were still alive to work were transported out of the town in cattle cars. The journey southwest took several days. Those packed tightly into the boxcars had no idea where they were going, but soon found out. They were being taken towards a Nazi extermination and slave labor complex 37 miles west of Krakow, Poland. The Germans had renamed the town Auschwitz.
The greeting that we received was, we were told, you're in Auschwitz now, and the only way out of here is through the chimneys.
Since 1940, mostly non-Jewish prisoners, Poles, Soviet POWs, and German political prisoners had been dying in the first of the Auschwitz camps, Auschwitz No. 1, a converted former Polish army barracks. Fingernail marks on the walls of the gas chamber show the determination of those who wanted to escape their death sentence. A few feet away, victims were cremated in ovens. In 1942, the Nazis opened a much larger extermination and slave labor camp less than 2 miles away, called Auschwitz-Birkenau, or Auschwitz No. 2. It was the largest of the death camps, and in the early summer of 1944, the destination of Israel Arbeiter, his 2 brothers, and hundreds of thousands of other undesirables from across Europe. Decades after coming through Auschwitz-Birkenau as a 19-year-old, Israel Arbeiter returns.
The atrocities, what took place there, is just unbelievable. My mind is back in the time when I was here. I don't know whether you noticed when I come in, I walk a little while and then I kind of automatically stop and look around and see whether the gate is still open. And as you come in, the gate closed, and you hear that gate close. And so whenever I walk in, I get that feeling, whether the gate is open or whether it's going to shut behind me, and I'm going to be going through and stay here. And it's get that feeling.
Back then, Israel Arbeiter and the other Polish Jews arrived here with very few personal belongings. The Germans immediately took those. The one thing the Nazis could not steal from Izzy was the unspoken promise once made to his father in that ghetto in Starachowice. Itzhak Arbeiter's words to his boys about carrying on Jewish life and Jewish traditions would provide the strength and motivation Israel Arbeiter needed each day in Birkenau to somehow survive this place. 2 lines would once again determine who lived and who didn't.
That's the line where the trains were coming in. And over here, this is the boxcars that we came in with. And over here, as we came out from the boxcars, was the assembling of the people right here. And that's where Mengeles or one of the other doctors performed the selection by pointing to the left or to the right. The selection took place over here, and the groups were divided. We were just ordered to walk, or we didn't know which direction, which one is going where. My column was ordered to walk right here, this way. As we were walking here, this line, we were guarded on both sides by assessment with machine guns and dogs. And we were walking that long walk there into the unknown. This was all high voltage wires. That's what people threw themselves on and committed suicide. Although it took maybe 15 minutes to get there, but it was the longest walk of my life. Because in the background you could see the smoke coming out and the fire coming out from the chimneys. We were not told where we're going, and so it looks to me we were going in the direction of those tall chimneys where the smoke was coming out for. And that's what I had, that terrible feeling. And I was crying. I says, I'm young. I want to live. Why do I have to die here? Nobody listened. We just kept walking all the way to the very end, and that's where the tragedy begins over there.
Instead of being murdered, Israel Arbeiter became a slave laborer in Auschwitz.
This is my barrack. It was 28. The bunks were located like this, 3 tiers high. And the other side was for the bunks that were like this over here. I was all the way almost to the very end.
Each barracks was supposed to hold a few hundred prisoners, but the Nazis often packed in 800 to 1,000 men. There were over 200 buildings like this at Birkenau.
Right about over here was my bunk, where I was laying over here.
One of the jobs Israel Arbeiter was given in Auschwitz-Birkenau allowed him some freedom to move around inside the camp. The SS assigned Izzy to a work crew of 12 men.
I was working practically every day because my job took me all over this camp, as you see, with a roll wagon with other people to empty the toilets on the blocks. So I had that chance and opportunity to see what's happening, and I could freely speak with people.
Israel Arbeiter's toilet wagon route also took him past the women's camp at Auschwitz, which housed some 15,000 female prisoners. Here he came across the young Jewish girl who had once come to his aid in Starahovice.
There were 2 or 3 girls sleeping in there.
Izzy told Hannah if she needed anything, he would help. Hannah Bolter needed shoes to work, and work meant staying alive.
And I can help you too, because you helped me. I said, oh, that's nice.
Izzy attempted to smuggle her a pair, hiding them above the filth in the rolling wagon.
What do you think? I didn't get the shoes? I got the pair of shoes.
Israel Arbeiter's traveling work detail at Auschwitz-Birkenau allowed him to grasp the enormity of the crimes being committed inside the camp. Each, it seemed, was more horrific than the last.
When the gas chambers were busy, which was practically on a daily basis, the people sometimes you see were sitting in what's called the waiting area until there is room for them in the gas chambers to be able to go in and to be killed. And so this is called Brzynki, and they were sitting and waiting. The waiting room, can you imagine? The waiting room to be taken in to be killed. Oh, there's so many stories to tell from here. If this area, if these trees, if this ground, if that ground over there could only talk. What took place on this area is just unbelievable. The time that I was here and what I saw, and I still cannot imagine that this is what happened in the heart of Europe, in one of the most culturally advanced countries, that people could commit such atrocities. This is the area where the crematorium was. Of course, the Germans, before the evacuation of the camp, dismantled to take away, not to leave any sign of what there was here, what took place here. When they performed the selection and they took the little kids, ripping out children, infants from the arms of their mothers, just to torture them. And when they have little kids between 5 and 10 years old that were walking, they made them walk, from the selection area to the gas chambers area, walking, holding hands. So they were being guarded by the mighty German army with machine guns, with rifles, with the German Shepherd. God forbid that they shouldn't start a revolt, 5, 6, 7-year-old kids, and they ordered to undress and putting them into the gas chamber. It was cutting your heart to hearing the screams. And when they closed the door of the gas chambers, And you hear those little kids banging on the walls, on the doors, screaming, yelling for their mothers, to no avail. And those men that had children of their own could stand that and carry this out. And then the sergeant who was putting in the gas, the Cyclone B gas, he would say, "It's time to feed the dogs." And then you just heard those little kids screaming, crying, and then moaning, and one by one lay down on the cement floor and just go to sleep.
Today, a collection of thousands of family photos, hidden from the SS guards by prisoners in the camp, are all that remain of those who were murdered here. Israel Arbeiter's return to Auschwitz-Birkenau does not go unnoticed by a teacher and her students from Slovakia.
This was a killing factory for killing people. I came in one of those cattle trains. When the trains arrived here, we came out from the trains, and over here was selected. Did you hear the names? Dr. Mengeles, and then whoever he decided left or right, he went, shipped over there. They got the disinfection, cut the hair, took everything away, gave the number. A, 18,651. These were the numbers only of people that went into the camp. The people that were killed didn't get any numbers. My family was murdered, my father, my mother, my 7-year-old brother. You are going to, with all your beautiful faces, you're going to be the leaders, the future leaders, and you might have in the future the power to prevent a place like this to exist. You're all beautiful. Enjoy the day, enjoy your life, and go home and tell your parents, your families, what you learned, what you saw here.
As the Soviet army headed west into Poland in October of 1944, pushing the Germans back toward their own border, Izzy Arbeiter found himself once again involved in another selection process. This time, he was part of a group of Jews herded into the boxcars and transported out of Auschwitz-Birkenau death camp. Izzy's two brothers were left behind.
They wanted the people still to keep alive, but as long as they can produce to supply the German army.
In November of 1944, as Russian troops continued to advance, the Nazis began the process of dismantling Birkenau's gas chambers and crematoria. Trains no longer entered through this gate and delivered their passengers into this despicable murder factory, where over 1 million people were killed. The war for the soul of Europe was nearing its end, but the Nazi war machine was still in full production. Survivors from Auschwitz who could still be of some use to the Germans first arrive in Stutthof concentration camp in northern Poland on October 26th. 2 weeks later, 600 prisoners, including 19-year-old Izzy Arbeiter, were moved out of Stutthof, packed again like animals into roughly 6 cattle cars, and bound for Nazi Germany. The emaciated men in the striped uniforms passed by many picturesque German towns. Those who survived the 700-mile trip arrived at a slave labor camp outside of Stuttgart, Germany. Years later, Israel Arbeiter is welcomed to the village of Heilfingen, outside of Stuttgart.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, fine. Thank you. Nice to
Good
meet
to
you
see
again.
you.
We're very glad
Yeah.
to see you again.
Izzy is an honored guest of the Germans who live there, themselves still dealing with the sins of their fathers.
Your legacy, Mr. Arbeiter, must be passed on.
A crowd gathers to hear Israel Arbeiter talk. To his right is Walter Fischer. Like the majority of teenage boys in Germany, Walter was in the Hitler Youth at one time. Later in World War II, Fischer was a radio operator in the Luftwaffe, then ground soldier in the German army. Since the early 1980s, Walter Fischer has devoted much of his time trying to make sure Germans don't run from their past, but rather own up to it and learn from it. It's not an easy subject now in Germany, and it wasn't back then either.
93% of the population of Royston voted for the Nazi Party. The day after the war, nobody in Royston was a Nazi. You couldn't find a Nazi if you say that you're going to win the lottery. Nobody was a Nazi.
The entire huge organization to exterminate the Jews was concealed well enough so the majority of the people did not know about it. What I did know is that they were deprived of their rights. You see, these camps were established after the war had begun. And now you imagine a nation at war with all the media controlled by the government, and the Nazis were quite eager to keep that away from their people because they knew that the majority would not agree with that. So we did not know about it. I did not.
Salata. I think I'll take this.
Yes?
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
That evening at a dinner in the village, Israel Arbeiter and Walter Fischer sit together. Their discussions are cordial for the most part.
Usually it was the Hitlerjugend, was a prelude to the SS.
For Izzy, any type of forgiveness for the actions of Walter's generation is not possible.
In my time, I've seen terrible things being done by Hitlerjugend.
Well, soldiers are soldiers everywhere, and they ordinarily obey their orders.
We were ordered to wear the yellow Star of David, the yellow star in which it says Jude, one in the front, one in the back.
Students at a nearby school know of Germany's role in World War II and the Holocaust. Israel Arbeiter speaks to them honestly about his past and their future.
You could see the 4 crematoriums that were there, that the smoke and the fire from the chimneys coming out. The smell of burning flesh was just unbearable. And nobody came out from Auschwitz from there alive. With the generation, with this present generation, or the generation that was born after the war, that there is absolutely no hard feelings. We don't blame you for anything. You are not responsible for anything. You didn't do anything wrong. You shouldn't feel guilty.
The names of old friends on a monument in another village just outside of Halfingen still flow off Israel Arbeiter's tongue like it was yesterday.
Isaac Burstein, there was Abraham Stuttmann, there was Leo Katz, and Marion Kornblit and his brother Henrik Kornblit. That's it.
Izzy and the 600 slave laborers who deported Poland arrived here in November of 1944 to work at a large German airfield in the village of Talfingen. Not much remains of the airfield today, but old photos give a feel for the layout of the runway and the types of aircraft the Germans had operating here. Prisoners were housed in a hangar.
We had to be ready when the alarm sound or when it was snowing to be out with shovels and clear the runway so that the planes can be ready to take off. They had stationed there night fighters.
Each day, Israel Arbeiter and his work crew headed out on a 4-mile march to this quarry near the German village of Royston.
Breaking stones from large stone to small to sand to pebble that were being used for the highway. That's where I used to work. Starting from up there, we're going down, cutting a layer, and then cutting another layer and another layer. And there was the machine in this corner. This is the lorry, and these are the rocks, and there's still some in here, and this was full, and I was pushing this lorry. And at a certain point it got too heavy and I couldn't hold it back anymore. And so I let it go and it went into the lake. And that's when I was afraid of being accused for sabotage.
The quarry was just a short walk from a house Izzy and the other Jewish slave laborers would pass twice a day. The home belonged to a German family named Roth, who provided food for the prisoners, risking their own lives if they were seen by the guards.
This is where I walked by and she called me in. Okay. I remember this. That's where she gave me food. Hello.
On his final trip back to Europe, Israel Arbeiter pays a visit to the old Roth house. The Roth's youngest daughter, Hilda, who witnessed her parents' acts of kindness, is still alive.
So like, ooh.
That's really.
So
see, she remembers.
And is mijn enkeltochter.
Yeah, the minute she saw me, you know when that name used? 50 years ago, when she said, "Das Rulek." My name was Rulek here. In Hebrew it's Israel. In Yiddish it's Rulek. Yiddish, Polish, a mixture. The whole group used to walk by here and they were putting bread out.
Verstehen Sie Angst?
Angst, they were afraid. Angst meant they were afraid, they were scared. Yes. But they took the chance to help us. Yes. Dankeschön.
Viele Grüße an Ihre Frau, wenn reisen Sie wieder heim, wann?
Thank you very much. Good to see you. Take care of your grandmother.
At the end of what was once the 3/4-mile-long runway in the airfield in Talfingen is a small plaque, a marker to what was once a dumping ground for bodies, men who were no longer useful to the Nazis at the airbase because they were sick, weak, or dead. Of the 600 prisoners who arrived with Izzy, half ended up dying eventually, either here or elsewhere.
That was the Massgraben. That was the grave where we buried the people from the camp that the mayor of Talfingen wouldn't allow them to be buried on the German cemetery. Here we were dying of starvation, which took longer than the 15 minutes than the gassing in the gas chambers. The farmers were working here and they were afraid that the smell or the whatever happens to the deteriorating of the bodies, that the airmen might get sick from it. And so we took the bodies from the camp and brought them over here and digged out the hole. I was part of that group. Digged out, that's how I knew where it was. And we buried all the bodies over here. There's 72. Then in 1945, after the liberation, the French in Tübingen, the headquarters, asked us whether we know of any mass graves around here. And since I knew exactly where it was, we told them that we know, and so we drove out here and we started to open up the grave. And the next morning, they brought up the people from the nearby villages. The Frenchmen wanted them to see what happened here and what the Germans did to the people in the camp. And we have a big ceremony, a big funeral to bring the bodies to the cemetery in Talfingen.
The cemetery is about 1.5 miles from what was once the camp and airfield at Talfingen.
All along over here are the bodies of the 72 people. And so I'm going to say the prayer, the Kaddish. Iskadal v'iskadash shemei rabba. Kibram v'chom tishbechosa v'nechemosa v'nishma v'kol Yisrael v'al kol Yisrael v'yimra. May he rest in peace.
In mid-February of 1945, slave labor at Talfingen Airfield wasn't needed anymore. The Allies were closing in, so Izzy and any survivors were forced deeper into Germany, this time to another camp at Dortmurgen. 2 months later, as Israel Arbeiter marked his 20th birthday, the Germans decided that the remnants of the slave labor group were to be moved once more. This time, 256 miles towards South Tyrol in northern Italy. Izzy and the prisoners would have to walk.
The order came from Himmler that no Jewish prisoners should fall into the hands of the Allies. And so we were taken on the Dead March. And that was the other horrible thing, because we were taken to a destination where we were to be killed.
In the distance, Israel Arbeiter could hear artillery fire as the Allied armies closed the noose around the neck of the Germans. The guards were talking of putting any prisoners still alive in a barn and lighting fire to it, or gathering them on a bridge, which German engineers were about to blow up.
People were dying, people were being shot. If you stepped out from the line, seeing on the street something that you could chew on, a rotten apple or a rotten potato or whatever, and if you went out from line, you were shot there and left, and the highway was littered with bodies, with people that were killed.
3 days into their death march, Israel Arbeiter and the other walking skeletons were told by their German guards they could rest if they needed to.
All of a sudden, they started to feel sorry for us.
A short time later, the Germans guarding the prisoners vanished, and the Allied army appeared.
In the beginning, I didn't know what happened. I was numb. But after about a week, I remember just one day I broke down. I was crying hysterical. I was screaming, who am I? I had no name, I had a number. My number that's what I was called. In the camps I was called a number, not a name. I says, who am I? Where am I going? What am I going to do? Where is my family? Is anybody alive? Am I the only one? I had nothing. I had no money, I had no papers, I had nothing. I had this, what you see here, this is what I had on my back. And so I foolishly said, I'm going to walk into the world and find how far can you walk? But after walking a little while, I saw a garage, a hard garage from the house, and it was ajar. I looked in there and I saw a nice motorcycle. And so I says, oh, why don't I'm going to borrow that motorcycle. I'm going to borrow it. And so I went in a place in the city, and when you came in, there was a wall, big wall with names of people that were liberated and that live in different places. In the meantime, somebody comes over to me, a girl comes over to me, and she says, you know this girl that used to work with you, she survived. And so I said, oh, that's nice. I'm glad that she survived, that she's all right.
Hanna Balter survived Auschwitz. She was sent to a displaced persons facility set up by the Allies at what was left of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in northwest Germany. Hanna was one of many Jewish girls who had arrived there from Birkenau. After locating his younger brother, Izzy left on a 600-mile motorcycle ride to find Hanna.
The least I could do is go there and say thank you to her myself. Knowing that I have no special appointments the next day, so when I have a motorcycle, I says, no, I'm going to go there. I found that I came and I said thank you, and thank you very much for what you did for me, and I'm happy that you survived.
I said, what the hell, he knows that I'm alive. I said, oh, that's nice. And when he came in, they saw him. You know what they told me? He looks like a Casanova, you know.
So I said to her, would you like to go down for a walk with me? I see a lot of people are walking. She says, yes, I would like to, but I gotta tell you, see, there is 5 people that live here in this room, but we have only 1 pair of shoes between the 5 of us. And today is not my day to wear the shoes. And so I cannot go down. So I says, okay, which girl has the shoes today? Imagine, 1 pair of shoes between 5 girls. So she showed me which one it is. I went over, I begged her, I bribed her. She gave this girl the shoes. We went down for a walk and I ride on the motorcycle. And that was fine, everything was good.
Israel Arbeiter's Holocaust journey had ended.
People ask me, how did you survive? There's no answer. I have no answer. I can tell them from the situations that I got out from, that there was a superior power. And I can say only it was God that wanted me to live. Because I was not smarter, stronger, or better than the other people that were killed or died, or when killed, sent away, or whatever happened to them, than I was. But yet, I'm here. So it had to be the God that God wanted me to live. But then I turn around at the other way and I say, why me? Why me? Why not other people? Why not my mother? My mother was an angel. Not only because she was my mother, but she was an angel. How about doctors, healers that were healing other people, teachers, teaching other people, rabbis, priests? There were Catholic priests that were also murdered. And so I say, why not those people? Why didn't God help those? Why did God allow the children, the innocent little children, to be murdered? There's no answer. I ask rabbis, I ask anybody that can, there's no answer. We don't know. Nobody knows. Of course, I understand. Nobody knows.
Israel Arbeiter and Hannah Balter were married in 1946. They spent 3 years living in a displaced persons camp in Stuttgart, and then a house in Royston, Germany, before immigrating to the United States in 1949, where Izzy owned a successful tailor shop outside of Boston.
See the boat? See the boat, Emmy?
Oh, there's a boat.
See the boat over there?
Today, Izzy and Hannah have 3 children, 3 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. The Arbeiter family gathers weekly to share stories and celebrate the lives of Izzy and Hannah, and to carry on Jewish life and Jewish traditions. Fulfilling an unspoken promise Israel Arbeiter made to his father a long time ago.